Okay, so as you can tell, I just finished catching a 3D movie. All I gotta say is Justin Bieber's Never Say Never is an absolutely insane flick. You have to see it in 3D. Man, I felt like it was gonna reach out and touch me. It was sick. I totally got Bieber fever. I'm entirely messing with everybody. Okay, so Tokyo Gore Police is I it seems to cross so many different sorts of genres. It's definitely super over the top and fairly cheesecakey in some spots, and it blends bits and pieces of like Brain Dead or Dead or Alive, depending on the country you see it in. As well as like Starship Troopers. It takes a lot of very different approaches and kind of blends them together in one movie. From the opening scene, where this girl's watching her father, who's a cop, give this discussion, and then his head explodes. I don't mean like he gets shot. I mean like it explodes. That's what I found out about this movie. James Rolfe over at Cinemassacre, you might know him as the angry video game nerd. He did a video called like favorite head explosions, and one of the ones was like the opening scene from Tokyo Gore Police. So let's get to the actual meat of this movie. The Tokyo police force has been taken over. It's privatized. And when they show these people, they're essentially almost in what looks kind of like just full battle armor. And they essentially gun down criminals. There is no mercy for criminals. And they're hunting a new breed of criminal called engineers. And engineers have been like genetically engineered, so they're kind of like bizarre super freaks. The first time you see one gets his arm cut off, and then he grows a chainsaw. A weird chainsaw arm. That's kind of what happens. As they get injured severely, that body part becomes a new deadly weapon. And then when he finally gets killed, this is when you realize this movie thinks that the human body has like 1,000 psi of blood. So if anybody gets cut anywhere, they gush blood. And I do mean they gush blood. Most of the time, when someone's cut and bleeding, they almost like saturate the camera lens with blood. So you kind of know what you're in for. This is super over the top. Some of the commercials some of the like bizarre commercials that are very Starship Troopers. One deals with a new brand of razor blades, so you can cut yourself in really cute designs. And it's done very Tokyo pop style, so it's really bizarre and weird to watch. Especially kind of towards the end where you start seeing some of the other engineered people. One guy at the top, his head was cut off. So he's like a brain with cannons for eyes that shoot out hard brain chunks. Yeah, this is a very, very different movie. There are some scenes that I still, for the life of me, don't understand why they were in the movie. So you have the woman whose father was shot earlier grows up to be like a phenomenal engineer hunter. And of course, she finally comes face to face with somebody who was potentially her father's killer, who then became an engineer, who then engineers her. Therefore, throwing that huge conundrum that if you had to hunt engineers and you yourself are an engineer, what are you going to do? So she's trying to hunt down exactly where this person came from to try to find which laboratory and try to stop the engineers entirely. That's some of the movie, but this movie's almost 2 hours long. There also is like an underground fetish bar where people want to spend intimate time with engineered people. There's a woman who looks like she's a snail. And I know she's a snail. I mean, she has her eyes are on like eye stalks, and people are trying to pay money to get with these people. Someone else has been engineered to be a chair. So essentially you see a chair where it looks like it's all like inverted flesh and all very, like someone you'd see, it'd be like the chair you'd sit in to Clive Barker's house. And it's just really, you kind of go, okay, what? I'm entirely fine with the bizarre, like super over the top, violence with everybody's like, oh, you touch my butt in a subway, so I'm gonna cut your arms off. You're gonna just spray blood like you're Buckingham Fountain. But then you get to the weird, like, bizarre pseudo-sexual fetish side of being with people who have like genitalia on their face and have been modified so their legs are like a giant like alligator mouth. That's what? That's really bizarre. So then all of a sudden all the police force finally decides to go on like the massive killing spree of all engineers. They run into this one woman whose arm is now a giant razor blade knife, like the ones you extract out, you can break the tips in case it gets dull. She gets cut in the chest, and then where her nipples were in her belly button began to spray acid. This is a really, really crazy movie. I haven't even gotten like towards the end, where the police chief uses a gimp, for lack of better terms, because the person has nothing from like below the elbows and the knees, and attaches swords to her. I'm assuming it's a her. It's hard to tell because it's in a full bodysuit. And then begins to fight the engineer, I think it's Yuri, who of course is the main hero. By this time she suffered enough damage where part of her face has been replaced by what looks kind of like a red contact and a bunch of bizarreness. One of her arms has been cut, so it's now essentially, it's kind of like a snake. So it's this really bizarre Tromaville like snake arm. But before she makes it to that battle, she fights one of her close friends. And one of her close friends is using a rapidly repeating bazooka that's firing arms. Yes, he's taking bits and pieces of body parts and he loads them in, so like it's firing a fist, or it's firing a choke, or towards the end he decides he's going to kill her by literally giving her the finger. So all of the bullets all of a sudden are shot out with a certain digit very much sticking up. She deflects this in a very over-the-top fashion. And then she happens to defeat the sword for arm and leg gimp. And now it's time for her final massive confrontation against her and the boss of the Tokyo police force. I know I'm leaving quite a lot out, but there's a lot that happens in this movie that you can kind of go, yeah, I could probably skip this and it probably wouldn't affect the overall plot of the movie. So she finally begins to fight it. And of course, being that she's, better trained, as well as like genetically enhanced, and he's a guy in a very impressive armor, she pretty much schools him super quick. Like cuts off his legs. He then takes these syringes full of a chemical, sticks them into his legs, and I'm not kidding you, he begins to produce enough of a spray of blood from his leg stumps to fly. So you now have a woman who's missing part of her face, who has like a snake for an arm, fighting a guy who just has his legs cut off, who is now flying around on sprays of blood. This movie is so bizarre and over the top, but then again, the title is Tokyo Gore Police. So it's from Japan, and the word gore is in the title. So, if you're in the mood to watch something that's going to make you scratch your head till it's raw and bleeding, and your blood, of course, will be so pressurized that it'll spray out, hit a wall, probably bust a hole through that wall, and go into your neighbor's apartment or outside, this is definitely the movie for you. This is really weird and bizarre. I really hope this movie doesn't get, redone to become an American movie, because this one by itself is as weird and as whacked out as you can get. So if you just want to see like a blood fest, then this is definitely a movie for you. You could probably skip when they go to the club. Not a lot really happens in that scene. It's just really weird and bizarre, but this is a very unique movie of its sort, because you do have a bit of a police drama, but most of that is taken away from the sheer over-the-top campy cheesiness of this movie. But it's designed that way. From the get-go, you know exactly what you're getting into, and that is Tokyo Gore Police.